Let's start. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram. Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram. The first verse is the invocation verse, so we chant it in every class. So let us do it together. Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Sadgurum Pranatosmyaham. Om. Salutations to all. So yesterday we saw the brief introduction of Vivek Chudamani and also the first verse, the invocation verse. Now a little bit about the life of Adi Shankaracharya ji. So Sanatan Dharma is based on the knowledge revealed in the Vedas. So the tradition in our culture, our country has been of the Vedic knowledge that we have lived. The lifestyle we have lived is on the basis of the revelations that have happened in the Vedas. Now, we will see that when we go back into the history, India has been at the peak when different other cultures were still getting formed or getting more refined. The Vedic rishis, the masters, the kind of lifestyle that was there in India was much advanced. In all different aspects, if you see whether art, science, management, economics, literature, dance, music, in every field, the growth that India had achieved, the Vedic masters and the people of the Vedic times had, is unbelievable. Even today we have so many things which are, when we see the temples and the various things in our culture, how much depth, how much beauty. So this entire Vedic knowledge over a period of time, just like anything else, went through a decadence. So when we say a culture goes through a decadence, what goes through decadence? What is a culture, first of all? So when a group of people, Gurudev would say this, when a group of people stay together, so these are the features. Number one, group of people. Number two, they stay together. Number three, for a long period of time. Number four, practicing a certain way and values of life. So a group of people staying together for a long period of time in a geographical area, practicing certain values of life, then the fragrance of their life is called as the culture. So when we say a culture is a glorious culture, what is a glorious culture? A culture which is respecting certain values of life, where there is certain higher vision of life. That's the glory of that culture. What does the culture stand for? what kind of values the people follow, how uncompromising is their commitment to those values, how universal are those values, and what is their vision of life. If body alone is the fact of life, then to eat, drink, and be merry, that's the vision of life. The Vedic masters went much beyond that. They went beyond the body, they went beyond the mind, even beyond the intellect, into the realms of the infinite. And whatever they experienced in those quiet moments, see, they achieved great things in the world outside, but they also found that in spite of what we achieve, there is still a certain emptiness, there is still a certain void, a certain lack of fulfillment. So one of the very beautiful questions in the Upanishads is that, what is that gaining which nothing remains to be gained? That state of fulfillment. So they turned within. It is not that they escaped from life and then they turned within. They turned within, having seen through life, having understood the limitations of the life here, having lived certain values of life, having practiced living together, giving, sharing, being sensitive to the environment, all those values they practiced. Selflessness, honesty, straightforwardness, so many values which they practiced. That's the Vedic culture and its glory. Precision, quality, depth, so many values they practiced. And yet they achieved great success in the world outside. One of the most exhaustive studies that an economist called Angus Madison has done, he has studied the growth of economies of the whole world in the 2 millenniums. And what he found, that till the 18th century, the competition has always been between India and China. Between 33 to 35% of the world GDP was controlled by India. Sometimes China will come up with 35, sometimes India will come up with 35, China will go to 33. This kept on happening. It's only in 1800 when the Industrial Revolution happened, the whole shift has happened. So what he found interestingly about India is that whenever spirituality has been at its peak, prosperity has been at its peak in India. So these masters, they have achieved great things in the world outside, and the way of life which they lived, people who followed that way of life, they also achieved great things in the world outside. But they also found that this is not giving that lasting fulfillment, that permanent happiness. And hence, they turned within. And when they turned within, they discovered the absolute. So the Vedic knowledge has both the knowledge of the world outside as well as the knowledge of that supreme truth within. This knowledge that I am not the body, I am not the individual, I am that consciousness which enlivens this body, mind, intellect, as well as which is the substratum of the whole world. To live this knowledge is very subtle. And these Vedic masters, they gave us ways and means to live this knowledge in and through our daily life. In small, small ways, how to rise beyond body consciousness. They gave so many methods, including work, how to absorb oneself in the work completely, how to do one's own swadharma, when I really love what I do. So many practices, upvas, dan, yajna, many such practices, through which I can integrate the body, mind, intellect and rise above the identification with this. Now to live these values is not very easy, because our senses, they make us extroverted. There are temptations in the world outside. There is not enough intellectual stamina to live uncompromisingly. So there are many reasons why one compromises. So a culture declines when the value system of that culture we stop living uncompromisingly. From the time compromise starts, from there the decline of the culture starts, especially the spiritual culture. Because the spiritual culture is that which is about self-mastery, which is about selflessness, which is about service, about surrender. So to live the spiritual way of life, not everybody will be able to do. So over a period of time, we found that this great glorious Vedic culture went through decline. The values people started compromising. And also we find that the divisions increased, sectarianism increased, animal sacrifices were being done, which actually the Vedas do not prescribe. Even today, many people think that Hindu culture, the Vedas prescribe animal sacrifice has to happen. So animal sacrifice, sectarianism, the caste system got exploited, power centers became very, very strong. So harmony was threatened. Many such things when they happened, where the higher way of life people were not living. So as a result came up Buddha, who walked out of Hinduism and who started his own way of living. Buddhism started flourishing through compassion, through the middle path. And Buddha did not prescribe the way of Vedic way of living, because he was a revolt, he was a rebel against the prevalent practices of Hinduism, which were into a decadent state. So Buddhism did not advocate the Vedic knowledge, did not even say that there is a God who exists. Shunyavada is their highest philosophy. So when Hinduism declined, Buddhism came up, many people, including many kings, they converted to Buddhism. And when a king converts to Buddhism, the whole Praja also will take it up. So as a result, a lot of people went into that Buddhistic way of life. Over a period of time, Buddhism also declined. And we find that there was a time when Buddhism has declined, Hinduism has declined, there is complete intellectual directionlessness. The leaders not very clear about what kind of value system to follow, what kind of ideals to have, what is the higher way of life, lot of confusion about that. So materialism prevails, ritualism prevails. Interestingly, what all Buddha stood for, everything got compromised. Buddha walked out of sectarianism, Buddhism divided into various sects. Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana. Buddha didn't want mechanical rituals and elaborate rituals. Rituals got into Buddhism. Buddha did not want idols. Even today we see the biggest idols in the world are of Buddha. So just like Hinduism went through decadence, Buddhism also went through decadence. And the leaders very confused. Role models are not available. And when higher vision is not available in a society, there will be absolute chaos. There will be corruption, there will be selfishness, there will be lot of greed. So this is a scenario in 7th century India. Absolute chaos. Now some people, there are two opinions. One aspect is that Shankaracharya ji was born in the 7th century. But there are a lot of other evidences also which prove that he was born 2500 years ago, much before Christ. But anyway, that debate still goes on. The historians have accepted only 7th century AD as of now. It still remains to be accepted by them that yes, he was before Christ also. So as of now, we will go by that 7th century AD, this is the situation in India. And at that time, in a place called Ernakulam in Kerala, which is about 2 hours drive from Kochi, Kerala has a tradition, the maternal tradition. So the maternal house of Adi Shankaracharya ji is in Ernakulam. Shivguru and Aryamba, they are the parents of Lord Bhagwan Adi Shankaracharya. So they prayed to Lord Shiva, who was in Thrissur, Vadakkanathan temple. Even today you can go there. Very beautiful, auspicious temple. 13 feet is the linga. So when they used to pray to the Lord that may we have a child. And it is said that Bhagwan appeared before them and gave them a choice that would you like to have a son who is would you like to have a son who is going to live long, or would you have a son whose life is short but who will live a brilliant life? So when the choice was given to them, they said, we want a son who is brilliant. And the life of that son would only be 16 years old. So now they chose, and Shankaracharya ji was born. You see, Puja Gurudev Swami Chinmayanand ji spent his whole life sharing the knowledge of Advait Vedant, which is what Shankaracharya ji championed. And the maternal house of Shankaracharya ji was up for sale. Can you believe? The house of Shankaracharya ji was up for sale. People in this country should have taken charge of that house long back, made it a historical monument and propagated the values of Shankaracharya ji, the Advait Vedant that he championed. But that was the state. Even today, our Hindu culture is in that decadent state, where we have not recognized the great masters of our own culture and our own country. So luckily, when Gurudev came to know that this house is for sale, he immediately told people that no matter what is the price that is being asked, don't bargain with that Nambudri. Give him 1 rupee extra and just take it. And that house is where we have our Chinmaya International Foundation. Our Chinmaya University also is registered from there now. So that is the place where he was born. You see what was the level of decadence that even a great master like Shankaracharya ji, who is born in Kerala, it is very well known, it's a maternal tradition. And yet the belief still is that he is born in Kaladi. Kaladi is the place where Shivaguru stayed. So the father, his house is Kaladi. Mother is in Veliyanad in Ernakulam. And that's where the maternal tradition it is. So Shankaracharya was born in that place there. But even till today, everyone believes that he was born in Kaladi. So in that place, in Veliyanad, he was born as a result of prayers to the Lord. But as he was born for a particular purpose. Now we should remember one aspect. Though he was born because of the grace of Lord Shiva, and many people consider him as an avatar of Lord Shiva, we must also look at Shankaracharya ji as a great leader, as a spiritual master, and as a mighty missionary who went around this country reviving the culture of this country. And by the time he dropped his mortal body, he had re-established the glory of the Vedic culture, Advaita Vedanta. So if we look at him as a spiritual master, as somebody who was a mighty missionary, as a great leader, there is a lot to learn from his life. But if we say that he is just an avatar, then we will stop learning. We will just say, oh, it's possible. All this is possible by him because he is an avatar. Somebody's audio is on. Can you please mute it?
देखो ना, ये वाला है ना, इसी वाले में ये ध्यान से दबाएंगे ना.
So when we consider him as a leader, there's a lot to learn as a spiritual master, as a mighty missionary. So as he was born at a very young age, it is said that his first composition was at the age of 6. It is called Bala Bodha Sangraha. Shankara Jayanti. So Shankaracharya ji's birthday, he was born on the Shukla Panchami day in the Vaishakha month. It will generally come in April. Most of the time it comes in April in this in our English calendar. So he was born, and at a very young age, he was a child prodigy. He exhibited a lot of efficiency in learning and very fast. By the time of 6, he had mastered the Vedas. Can you imagine? He's already mastered the Vedas at the age of 6, and his composition was at the age of 6 was Bala Bodha Sangraha. At 3, he was initiated into the Aksharabhyas. By 6, he mastered the Vedas. And it is said that he, as a brahmachari, we given the initiation, Janeyu Samskar, and then the Gayatri Mantra one is taught, and then one learns the Vedas. And as a brahmachari, one goes for Bhiksha. One lives on alms. One day, as he was going for a Bhiksha, he reached a house of a very poor person. And when he reached there, he was asking for Bhiksha. The lady was so poor that she did not have anything to eat, but she had a very genuine heart and she wanted to offer some Bhiksha. There was one small amla fruit in her house. So she brought that amla fruit and gave that to her, gave that to Shankara. And looking at her condition, that she is so poor, but she still has this genuineness to serve Bhiksha, Shankaracharya ji instantly composed what is called as a Kanakadhara Stotram. He invoked the grace of Mother Lakshmi, and there was a rain of gold coins in that home. So as a young boy, he had compassion, he had kindness. Looking at the suffering of people would move him. He would want to actively do something to remove their suffering. These are qualities of a mighty leader, of a great master and a missionary. Another incident in his life is at the age of 8, when he had finished his training at Gurukul and he returned. Can you believe at the age of 8 he finished his training of Gurukul? graduation, everything over, came back after mastering the Vedas. So when he came back to his home, there was this river called Purna. Even today you see near Kaladi that river flows. So this river Purna is where the mother used to go. It was far that time from her home. So she would go there to collect water. One day he found that mother had not come back. So he went in search of the mother and he found that she was lying unconscious. She had fainted. She had injured herself. And it had become difficult. So that day he prayed that, "Oh Mother Purna, you please start flowing near our house so that the mother does not have to go through so much of trouble to walk up all the way and to collect the water." And it is said that the river changed the course and it started flowing through Purna river, through the near the house of Shankaracharya. Now see, these will all look like miracles that are done. But Shankaracharya's life is not about miracles. His life is about Advaita Vedanta and championing that cause and many great things. These things are told to invoke, to inform us of those qualities, that what are the qualities that he had, how he will be moved when somebody is suffering, whoever that person may be, his own family or anybody else. And when he saw the state of Hinduism around him, that moved him much more. That in what level of decadence have we fallen? So it is said at that point in time, there was this king, king called Rajashekhara, who was ruling Kerala at that time. And there were many learned pundits and people, etc., who used to come and they used to be in his court. And they had also heard about the child prodigy Shankara. So it is said that this king came to meet Shankaracharya ji, and he himself was a great poet. So he composed, and it is said that this king had composed 3 books. He brought all of them and he gave it to Shankaracharya ji, who appreciated his lot of his literary talent. So this was his situation at that time. And he understood that our culture needs us. 8 years of age, and his mind goes to what is the state of our culture today, why our society is in a decadent state. See, this entire thing is born out of his compassion. So he decides that I have to do great work to revive this culture, and that's the mission of my life. So it is said that once when he was taking bath, one important thing to know is Shivaguru passed away quite early in the childhood of Shankaracharya ji. So the mother was alone and the mother has brought him up. At 8 years, when he returned, he was convinced that he has to dedicate his life for revival of Hindu culture. See, the study of the Vedas that he did made him very aware of the glorious way of life, the vision of the Vedas. But what he saw around him also pained his heart that this is not what we are living. And he did not become pessimistic. He did not reject that knowledge. He did not say that, what is the use of this knowledge? Why should I even live this knowledge when what is written in the Shastra and what is being practiced is something completely different? He never condemned, because he understood the depth and the beauty of this Vedic knowledge and the vision of life. So he decided proactively that we have to re-establish this glory. We have to revive this culture. So cultural revival, national integration, and establishing Advaita Vedanta, this became his, his motto in life. Today, we are very concerned. Save the tiger, save the rhino, save the environment. No doubt we need to. But what about culture? Cultural values, when they start disintegrating and when people don't live the higher way of life, the culture disappears like this. To build a culture takes many generations. But to lose a culture, the apathy of one generation is enough. If one generation says, I will not follow this way of life, forget way of life, even one practice. Where do we do the Sandhya Vandan today? Just think about it. A simple practice, notice. To chant the Gayatri mantra, every person who follows Sanatan Dharma is to chant that Gayatri mantra. Like we say, the Muslims have 5 times namaz, the Christians have Sunday mass. What do the Hindus have? So we say, no, we have a lot of freedom. We don't have anything like that, but that is not true. Along with that freedom, we also have a certain discipline. And Gayatri Mantra is our steady standard practice. But over a period of time, we have lost it. Very few people today do the japa of Gayatri Mantra, the Sandhya Vandan, religiously, meticulously. And it is such a powerful mantra. Worship of the sun, worship of Ishvara through the sun. So, cultural practice, one generation says, I will not do, we will lose it. So, Shankaracharya ji understood that the importance of this culture, because if culture is not preserved, the society and the world will not be harmonious. Higher culture has to be preserved. Puja Gurudev used to say a very nice statement. He said, without culture, man is a vulture. Meaning a higher way of life, if it is not there, our whole attention will only be on the body, no matter how high we soar in life, whatever achievements we have. So to revive this higher way of life is what Shankaracharya ji committed his life to. At 8 years, he wanted to take up full-time work to revive this culture, for which he would have to renounce his family life. Because it requires full-time commitment. He would have to travel. He would have to give his full mind to it. So his mother was alone and he wanted to take sannyas. But the mother was hesitant. One day it so happened that as he was taking bath, the mother was on the banks filling up some water. At that time, a crocodile caught his leg. And the crocodile was pulling him down. So Shankaracharya ji called out to his mother saying that, oh mother, please help me, please save me. This crocodile is, has caught me. But he was in the middle of the river. The mother didn't know how to swim. She tried to get help, but not many people were around that time. So in that scenario, Shankaracharya ji tells his mother that, please give me permission. I want to drop this body as a sannyasi.
मीटिंग करना पड़ेगा ना.
So he says that please give me permission to take sannyas. See, in our culture, it is said that a person should die as a sannyasi. Means what? A person must live a whole life, a life of fulfillment. So the 4 ashrams that we have, Brahmacharya ashram, Grihastha ashram, Vanaprasthashram and Sannyasashram. 4. If you want to remember it in a very simple way, it's very easy. First 25 years, learn. Next 25 years, earn and burn.
Through meeting. Yeah.
Third stage, take a U-turn. And fourth stage, no return. Learn, earn, burn, U-turn, no return. Simple. The whole scheme of life is here. So 50 years if I live, gaining knowledge and living in the world, fulfilling my duties towards my family, responsibilities, seeing through name, fame, success, prosperity, all that. Then the next 25 years are to turn. That is, first 50 years are called Pravritti Marg. Next 50 years are called Nivritti Marg. So 25 years then to turn the mind within. And the last 25 years, exclusive commitment only to the truth. So when it is said a person must die as a sannyasi, means having been born as a human being, this is a golden opportunity to rise above body identification and to know our true nature. That life is a full, complete life where we have seen through everything. We have had enough vairagya, dispassion, turned the mind within and know the self. Now, at that young age, Shankaracharya ji, his mind was already dispassionate. He was already committed. He wants to do this work for revival of the culture. And the crocodile has caught his leg. He says, please allow me to take sannyas. This sannyas is called apat sannyas. In difficulty, one takes this sannyas. So he says, please give me your blessings, because without the parents' blessings, so for a brahmachari to take sannyas, the blessings of the family, the parents is required. And for a grahasti to take sannyas, the permission of the spouse is required. So he asked for the blessings from the mother, and the mother, she sees that this crocodile has caught his leg and there is no way to help him out. And she says, okay, I give you permission. Just imagine at that time when the crocodile has caught his leg, he takes sannyas. Bhu sannyastam maya, bhuva sannyastam maya, suva sannyastam maya. Over. That I renounce the pleasures of this world, I renounce the pleasures of the interspace, and I renounce the pleasures of the heaven. And he took sannyas, and incidentally the crocodile also left him. Now many people just say that, Shankaracharya ji staged this whole drama because he wanted to take sannyas. Now whether he did that or not, that only he knows. How can we even judge? But the symbolism is very important. In this samsar, when we are drowning, the crocodile is the maya which has caught us. We are drowning in this samsara. And the only way to get out of this is to renounce the body identification. Sannyas is not just external. External is the expression. It is an internal attitude where I renounce my attachments, renounce the desire for pleasure, renounce the desire for success, name, fame, renounce the expectations from people. So it is said when somebody takes sannyas, they give the highest dan. What is the highest dan? Highest dan is abhay dan, the dan of fearlessness. When we take sannyas, we give abhay dan. Why? To the whole world, we declare that we do not want anything from this whole world. So you don't have to be any more scared of me, because I want nothing from you. Till I want something from you, then I will have expectation, dependency, attachment, and that attachment will lead to fear, anger, sorrow. But when one takes sannyas, one drops all those expectations. One commits one's life only to thinking about the Lord, spreading the glory of the Lord. So when Shankaracharya ji took sannyas, he came out, crocodile has left him. He goes to his mother and he says, "Oh mother," he prostrates and he says, I thank you for giving me this permission to take sannyas. I commit my life to a higher way of life. I need to do this for my country, for my culture. Please give me permission. I need to go." Somebody's audio is still on. Everybody, can you please mute your audio? I'm not able to see, I'm not able to mute two people. One plus five, there is somebody on that name and one sadhana. May I request you to please mute the audio? On your left hand side corner, there will be a mic symbol. Just go and mute that. So, Shankaracharya ji takes permission from his mother and he has taken sannyas now, so he won't stay with his mother, has to go, and he has a mission to accomplish. But he promises to his mother that whenever you need me, you just remember me and I will be there. And he keeps that promise. Especially the mother tells him that in my last moments, I would like you to be there. And Shankaracharya ji promises that yes, I will be there. And he leaves. Now just think about it. He has already mastered the Vedas. He has learnt the Vedas. But he still goes in search of a guru. And he walks all the way. He wants to meet a great master he has heard about called Govinda Bhagavat Pada. So Vedic knowledge he has learned, and he is an incarnation of Shivji. If we consider him as that way, then there is no need for him to go to any guru. But he goes in search of a Vedantic master, Advaitic master, to get initiated into the philosophy of Advait Vedanta. You know, he has written, Shankaracharya ji has written in his commentary one very important line. He says, Shastrajnyaha api swatantriyena brahmajnana anveshanam na kuryat. That you may be a Shastrajna, you may be a person well versed in the scriptures. Even then, independently, one should not inquire into Brahmagyan. One must seek a guru and one must learn at the feet of the guru and follow the path. The tradition of our culture is that when we have proper qualifications, we go to the teacher. Guru Upasatti is a very important step in one's spiritual life. And then listen, reflect, contemplate, and establish in the truth. Shravan, Manan, Nididhyasan, Samadhi, all that happens. We will see as we go along in Vivek Chudamani, all this will come. So he goes in search of a guru. And he has heard about this great master called Govinda Bhagavat Pada. So he walks up and he goes to Narmada, the banks of Narmada river. And as he is going through this whole place from Kerala to Narmada, he is also observing what is the state of our country, what is the state of our culture. And he goes in search of this master by foot. One interesting incident comes up is one day when he was walking, it's very, very hot. And as he is walking, he finds that he he is sweating, and it is unbearably hot. So he comes and he sits below a tree. He is taking rest below a tree. There he finds that there are some 2, 3 frogs who are there, and in middle of the day it is so hot. These frogs are there. Suddenly, from somewhere, a snake comes and raises the hood and is giving shelter to these frogs. So Shankaracharya ji wondered, generally the snake would have eaten away the frog. How is it that this snake is giving this uh, shade to the frogs? He didn't just pass off that incident thinking, oh, it must be something. He said there definitely must be some Mahatma who is nearby, in whose presence even the natural enemies, they lose their fear and their enmity. So he starts asking and he finds that this is the place where the great Rishi Rishyashringa was there. From Ramayana, he's a great Rishi, Rishyashringa. So he says he found out from the people nearby that this great Rishi Rishyashringa had uh, done penance there, and his ashram was there. And so this he keeps in mind. And when he does his work of reviving the culture, the first matha that he establishes is the Sringeri Matha in this place. It's in Karnataka. So the first matha he establishes is there, and he makes Sureshwaracharya ji the first Shankaracharya of that matha. So he keeps this in mind. Now he's walking up, he goes up to Narmada and he asks, it's very interesting, is Shankaracharya ji knows about Govinda Bhagavad Pada, but a lot of people there, they don't know. So he goes around asking there, is there a person called Govinda Bhagavad Pada? I've heard that he's a great master and I want to learn. So people there don't know. But they tell him that there's one cave in which one old person is sitting and he's supposed to be a great master, and for a long time he has been meditating. He's in Samadhi Avastha. Maybe you are referring about him. So Shankaracharya ji finally he finds out and he goes there at Omkareshwar and he goes inside the cave. He prostrates. And the people around tell him that this great yogi is actually waiting for somebody. We don't know whom he is waiting for, but he's waiting. And we have not seen him out for a long time. So we don't know what is his condition. So he goes there and he goes inside and he prostrates. And as he prostrates, slowly Govinda Bhagavad Pada comes out of his Samadhi and he asks him the question that who are you? And Shankaracharya ji he composes instantly what we today call as Dasha Shloki. Na bhumir, na toyam, na tejo, na vayuhu. Like that he composes. I'm not the 5 elements, I'm not the mind, I'm not the intellect, all those. Similar to Nirvana Shatkam. Nirvana Shatkam is 6 verses. This is Dasha Shloki. Every paragraph will end with the line Tadeko Vashishta Shiva Kevaloham. I am that one Tadeko Avashishta, one permanent pure consciousness, auspiciousness, Shiva. I am that. So 10 verses he composes. Not so that it is not that he doesn't know the Advaitic knowledge. He knows the Advaitic knowledge, but still he goes in search of a teacher and requests him to initiate him and get him established in this truth. So the Mahatma opened his eyes and he introduced him, and that Mahatma was Govinda Bhagavat Pada, and he said, I come here to surrender to you, please accept me as your disciple. And Govinda Bhagavat Pada accepts. Govinda Bhagavat Pada is the disciple of Gauda Padacharya. Gauda Padacharya is the one who wrote the Karikas on the Mandukya Upanishad. You see, they lived for thousands of years. We may or may not believe that, but it is possible. By the control of the mind and the pranas, they were able to achieve all this. And so, Shankaracharya is very fortunate. You will see as we go along about his life, he was able to meet Gaudapada Acharya also. And he met Vedavyasa also. Great minds, when they meet, what an inspiration it would be, what conversations they would have. You know, so he learned from Govinda Bhagavat Pada. And it is said that once Narmada was in floods and everything was getting destroyed on the banks of Narmada. And the disciples were very scared that their ashram also would get washed away, and especially the cave in which the master was meditating. He was meditating now, he is lost in samadhi again. Then we don't know when he will come out. So they were very disturbed and they went to Shankara and they said that, you know, please help us. So it is said that he took his kamandalu and he kept it. And he said that Narmada will not be able to cross this. And the ashram and the disciple, the master and his cave and everything. So when Narmada came to that point and touched the kamandalu, she became normal. The floods, they stopped. So Shankaracharya ji was not just a Advaitic master, but he was also a great yogi. He had a lot of yogic powers also. He has learned from the Vedas also, and he himself must have practiced. So he had these great yogic powers. When his master came out from Samadhi, it has been few years. So it is said at 12 years he reached his master. By the age of 12, he had reached his master. He has studied. Not reached it. He would have reached his master by 10, stayed with the master for some years, 2 years or so. And by the age of 12, his master told him that you have to go and you have to share this knowledge with the people. So Shankaracharya ji wanted to write commentaries. You know, one of the ways he wanted to revive the culture was to bring back the essence of the Vedic knowledge to the people. And for that he wanted to write commentaries on the Prasthanatraya, Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads and Brahma Sutras. So his guru just told him that you write on Vishnu Sahasranam first. And Shankaracharya ji wrote his commentary on Vishnu Sahasranam, 1000 names of Lord Vishnu. Very beautiful commentary. And he gave it to the guru. When the guru read that whole commentary, it is said that he could not put that book down. Like you and I read sometimes some books, thriller or fiction or some such books. You can't keep the book down. That way Shankaracharya ji has written the commentary on Vishnu Sahasranam and his guru was not able to put it down. And when he finished reading the book commentary, he told Shankaracharya ji that you don't need my permission for writing commentary on anything now. You are an authority by yourself. Please write on whatever you feel like. And so saying, he blessed Shankaracharya ji and gave him his blessings that go and revive this culture. Don't keep this knowledge with you. At 12 years, he starts writing. And he writes the commentaries. he starts actually, he goes around sharing this knowledge and eventually he writes the commentaries. But the idea is that he has started, his writing of his commentaries has started. And his missionary life starts now. From his guru, he got the knowledge, he practiced, he got established there. And then he wanted to share this knowledge with the people. So that missionary life of Shankaracharya ji, what he achieved, how our culture was revived because of his efforts, that we will take up in our session tomorrow. Anybody wants to ask anything, you are welcome. Okay, so we continue tomorrow. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate
पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति हरि ओम श्री गुरुदेव नमः हरि ओम।